For today's message, I want to focus on hope and what gives us hope and what kind of hope is lasting hope and what kind of hope might lead us to despair when those hopes are dashed. I opened last week's sermon with the news that is all abuzz in clergy circles about our denomination's reputed decline. In 2020, our average numbers, Sunday attendance dipped below 500,000 for the first time, and as a result of the pandemic in 2021, our numbers are now below 300,000, and I said that is certainly not the right trend. Now, if you're in the business, like me, the decline of the church is something that I wake up to every morning, and it causes me despair, and I wonder, where's the hope? But I imagine that's not what you wake up every morning and worry about. I think maybe what you might wake up more often and think about are the kinds of things we confront in today's reading from Isaiah, chapter 35. And Isaiah gives us a fairly lengthy list of reasons for despair and loss of hope. He talks about loneliness. He talks about physical weakness. He talks about fearful hearts, blindness, lameness, thirst, moral collapse, foolishness. Although there's a bit of hope for the fool because apparently this holy highway that God will be building you can't get lost on. Even a fool won't get lost on it. Some sort of heavenly GPS must be involved. He talks about ravenous beasts, external threats. And to each of these, Isaiah offers hope. And the hope that Isaiah offers is the hope of the Messiah, the one who is to come, the anointed one. In Greek, we call him the Christ. And in today's reading from Matthew, we meet that Christ again. John's disciples go out and meet him. And the readings together, I think, underscore that for every human being, life without hope is a desperate affair. Even with our essential needs met, our physical needs, our housing needs, even with those needs met, if we somehow are living a life without hope, we're living a desperate life. And so both of these readings tell us that Christ is our reason to hope. Isaiah speaks of the hope of an age to come when all is restored. And Jesus makes it clear to John's disciples that he is that Messiah, come at last to restore, and that a new age is beginning. John's disciples ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" And Jesus replies in so many words, "See for yourself. Do not the blind receive their sight and the lame walk? Do you not see lepers being cleansed and deaf hearing? Do you not even see the dead being raised up? And the poor finally having some good news preached to them?" Now I imagine these miracles echo some of what you pray about or what you keep in the depths of your heart, those hopes and those longings. And so I think even in our prayers, even in our hearts, we see that we need hope to live. We need something to live for. And maybe, like the disciples of John, we're wondering if Jesus is that reason to live, or if we should look for another. Do we put our hope in him, or do we put our hope in another? Now, I think I can speak for all of you, including myself, that if I were faced with blindness or sudden paralysis or deafness or a death sentence, the first thing I would look to do is talk to a doctor about it. And if I were faced with depression or a tough choice, I would look to a counselor or a therapist, or for a legal matter, I'd go to an attorney. And so I think, like all of you, we all share something in common with John's disciples. Because our first question when faced with things that might cause us to lose hope and have despair, even if our faith is rock solid, is not to go to Jesus, but to look for another. Any of those I just described would be people we would turn to. I know I talk to my wife, my friends, and then I sometimes realize, gee, did I talk to Jesus? Why have I put him at the bottom of the list? Jesus is pointing to his miracles, and yet is that what we're supposed to take out of his lesson today? Are we supposed to think that Jesus is this miracle worker, and by putting our faith in him, we can, as Norman Vincent Peale once said, expect a miracle? You know, that kind of theology is still popular today. If you really just have enough faith, then everything will work out fine, and the miracles will start, springing up like roses wherever you go. But I know I do, I suspect you also guard against that kind of disappointment. Guard against being disappointed in that kind of miracle religion. It's a far more practical approach for us to take. And even though the miracles were real in this story, I think that might be why Jesus ends his conversation with John's disciples by saying, sure, look at the miracles, but blessed are you if you take no offense at me. So Jesus is saying, yes, I am he who is to come. I am the Messiah. The miracles are an attestation of that. They are proof of me being the Christ. But nevertheless, what I have come here to do, what you will see me do, may offend you. And so blessed are you if you follow me in faith, not because I've met your expectations. Now, you've heard the expression, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And I think the same is true for hope or for a wish. The thing you want stops being the thing you want once you have it. And that's a good thing if you're lame and you need to have your mobility restored. It's a good thing if you're blind and you need your sight restored. And it's a good thing if you're deaf and you need your hearing restored. So there is genuine goodness in Jesus' miracles. But as I've said before, hope is something that's essential to life. Even if we have all our needs met, a life without hope is a life of despair, a desperate life. So there might be a problem for you and me if we suddenly find our hopes have all been fulfilled, and then we are without hope and back in a desperate situation. I think that Jesus offers us a different kind of hope. He offers us a hope that survives its fulfillment. The wish that survives its coming true, the cake you can both have and eat. Because when we put our hope in Jesus, we are putting our hope in the cross, which is, quite frankly, something offensive. And yet, if we let the cross do its work in our lives, it will transform us. I think people find the cross offensive because it purports to cure us of an inherited inborn defect called original sin. No one wants to have to acknowledge that we were born the wrong way. That's offensive. And indeed, our culture tells us, as it has in every time and age and place, it's not unique to America. Our culture takes us to take pride in and find our hope in the circumstances and conditions of our birth. At the same time, we are rapidly looking at something new in human history, which is to say that aided and abetted by technology, we're fast learning how to change any inherited characteristic or trait we might want, prenatally or even after we're born. And so I think the modern mind is somewhat schizophrenic. On the one hand, you have a kind of determinism that we're born a certain way and that these things can't be changed, and yet in the same breath we turn around and say we're free to change anything we want. We have determinism and autonomy. We are completely free to do what we want, and yet we are absolved from anything we do by the circumstances we find ourselves in. That simply can't work. It simply can't stand. That's a kingdom divided against itself. But, as I said, we are in an age where we no longer need to look to Jesus as the miracle worker, because we're being equipped every day with the ability to work our own miracles. We are free to fulfill our each and every hope, whatever that hope is. And so if we can self-fulfill all our hopes and expectations, then what hope have we? We've simply put our hope in ourselves. And I don't think that's the kind of hope that can survive its being fulfilled. What will make our lives bearable when we have everything we could possibly hope for? As I said, our hope must be in Jesus. His is the hope that can survive being fulfilled, just as his is the life that can survive death and the grave. So we put our hope in Jesus. We put our hope in a hope that will last. Jesus speaks to the crowd after John's disciples leave. He turns to them and he says, "What did you come out here to see? What did you go out into the wilderness to behold? A reed shaken by the wind, a man clothed in soft raiment. Why did you go out? What did you hope to see? What did you hope to get out of this? Did you hope that John was a prophet?" Well, yes. He was a prophet. So your hope has been fulfilled. Now what? Go back to your old lives? How can you? Jesus says, you have seen all there is to see. You have seen the greatest prophet who ever lived. And Jesus doubles down on that and he says, not only have you seen the greatest prophet who has ever lived, you have seen the greatest man who was ever born. Among those born of women, there has been no one greater than John the Baptist. And then Jesus offers this stunning reversal, which he does throughout the Gospels. Jesus says, yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. He who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than the greatest man who was ever born. The first shall be last and the last first. This is exactly the kind of reversal that Jesus is famous for, of turning the whole thing upside down. What Jesus is saying is that if you put your hope in him, then you and I will be greater than John the Baptist. We will be greater than the greatest who ever lived. That is something, I think, to look forward to. That, I think, is something to take comfort in. Here is hope that we can finally trust in. Hope that will not disappoint. Hope that will last because it springs from eternity itself. Amen.